listening to Muslimish Freethinkers, a podcast dedicated to fostering conversations on matters of faith and disbelief.
There you go. Hello, thank you for coming to what I'm calling the Muslimish Conference. This is our 14th conference. We've started in 2012, and last year we've had 3 conferences. This year we're going to have 4 in Boston, New York, Chicago, and Detroit. Thank you for coming. I think that this is, even though we have a small audience today, we are recording this. We're live streaming it. We're going to put this content online, and that way a lot more people will see it. I think it's a good opportunity, even with the small audience that we have today, that we have a good discussion, and we share ideas and we share questions, because that's the whole idea of Muslimish, is that through discussion we can come to new understanding of things and be able to deal with problems that have been avoided because the discussion has not been allowed, and because people are just either scared or would be persecuted if they speak out. But we have a unique opportunity here, and we'll get through that. So first I want to start by thanking our Muslimish organizers in Boston, Eman and Saeed. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Sohan, thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you so much. It's not a lot that we sometimes face some problems trying to find location that will allow us to speak. Even though we're in the United States, there's still a lot of hesitation in allowing people who have left Islam and speaking directly about things that are wrong in religion, because religion is, considered a good thing in this country still. Muslimish. The name Muslimish, sometimes people have different feelings about it. A lot of people don't like it or like it a lot, but I'm going to tell you why, as co-founder and person who started the group, why I chose that name with the help of the organizer of CFI at the time, is because I felt that we wanted to include both people who have left Islam, who do not believe in Islam anymore, and people who are on the fence or still are questioning, or there are some things that don't sit well with them. And Muslimish could encompass both these groups of people. Muslimish are people like, Muslim, they're still Muslim, they still believe. Although, if they were in Muslim country, people would consider them atheists, because there are certain things in Quran and Sunnah that they don't agree with. And that's, not acceptable in Muslim majority countries. It could land you in jail, and it could get your head cut off in some places. And then there's also not Muslim, Mish Muslim, not Muslim anymore. I consider myself not Muslim. I used to be Muslim. I used to really believe. And now I don't. I don't because of, scientific information that I've discovered since I moved to the United States. I don't believe because I've had a daughter, and, I don't understand, I feel that Islam is a good religion if you're a man, but if you're a woman, really, I don't understand why you would choose that. But having a daughter really made me think about women's rights in a different way. And when I started talking to my friends in Egypt about giving my daughter, in America, you have to write your will. And I was telling my friends there that I'm going to write my will, I'm going to give my daughter half and my son half. And I was faced with huge backlash and a boycott campaign, even when I insisted on my opinion, when everybody told me that, oh, you're wrong. You think you're the only one who's right and we're all wrong? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm the only one who's right and you're wrong. Because, so I wanted a place for both people who left Islam, but come from Muslim background, and people who are questioning Islam, to be able to have a discussion about the things that don't make sense, the things that are just, don't are not in line with 21st century ethics. Modern ethics are better than religious ethics, in my opinion. And we need at least to be able to discuss these things. We at least to be able to have a place where we talk about these things, which didn't exist before Muslimish. And I think Muslimish is still a unique place where both people who still believe and people who left the religion can still talk about these issues in order to make things better, not to just like bash Islam. This is not some, Christian group its all goal is just to say bad things about Islam in order to get people to join Christianity. We're not like that. We're not trying to get you to join a different religion. We're just trying to discuss the problems that we have in order to fix them. Who we are. We are a group of ex-Muslims and Muslims of various degrees of religiosity. We come together to discuss, we come together from different diverse backgrounds and cover a broad spectrum of views, positions, from atheist to agnostic to theist, ex-Muslim to cultural Muslim to believing Muslim, and more. We want to discuss ideas that are not allowed to be discussed, and we would go to jail for them in our home countries, and we want to abolish blasphemy laws. This is this is the long version of it, and this is the goals. I like to keep it short and sweet because I want you to know what it is that we're trying to do. We have 3 goals, and we're focused on these goals, and we have already achieved 2 of them, and we will continue to work on these goals. It's the 3rd goal that's the more difficult one, and I don't think we have a clear idea yet how we're going to do it, but we're going to get it done. This is not, and this is why I chose the title Practical Activism, because this is not just a group where we're going to sit together and complain about how bad we have it. We're going to get stuff done. We are not here to say like, oh, we have it so bad, we're persecuted. No, we are here to change that persecution, and we're to hopefully be able to abolish blasphemy laws. This is the goal, to abolish blasphemy laws. Again, the mission statement is to create a place for safe, supportive, and open-minded environment for exchange of thoughts and ideas among current and former Muslims, to foster a pluralist society, and to abolish blasphemy laws. Activities. We have now groups in 5 U.S. cities and 1 Canadian. I call them Speakers' Corners because Speakers' Corner is a place in London and Hyde Park where I was always fascinated with as a child in Egypt. It's a place where you can go and you can say your opinion, and there's an exchange of ideas. Last time I went there, it has been occupied by militant Muslims, and you cannot say your opinion anymore because extreme Muslims have taken over the Speaker's Corner in London. So we are creating a place in the United States and in Canada where we can speak freely and we can discuss these ideas and exchange our experiences and try to find solutions and not shy away from the challenges that we have and talk about them directly. So we have Speakers' Corners in 5 cities right now. These are our meetings. We have regular meetings in New York. We have two meetings a month in Boston, in Detroit, in Chicago, DC, and Toronto. We have about 1 meeting every month. And we have other activities too. We're building community. We're connecting people. People we're building our own community because the Muslim community that we come from does not allow us to speak freely. And most Muslim groups, even the most liberal of them, if you speak directly about things that are wrong in Islam, you will be kicked out. They will not allow you to speak directly about things that are wrong in Quran and wrong in Sunnah if you're saying that this is just wrong. If you say, well, if you look at it this way, that's an approach, but it's not our approach. I mean, we have people in the group who are still Muslims, still believe, still have some, believe in the divine, but they still see the problems in Quran and they are able to discuss them, and they're able to say that this is not correct in the Quran and this is not correct in Sunnah. We're building alliances with secular groups. We started with help from CFI, Center for Inquiry, United States, and from the group called Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain in London. The founder of that is Maryam Namazi. When we were first starting, they helped us start a meetup group to try to find others. Maryam Namazi helped me a lot by telling me how, we're organizing things and how the problems that they faced in London. And they have a whole different ballgame in London because there are real extremist groups there. And we'll get to that shortly. And we're also producing online content. So now we're recording this, we're live streaming it, and we have a YouTube channel, we have a podcast. I encourage you to join and subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast so you can always get the latest content that we're putting out there. Practical alliance. Muslims who want to reform Islam are treated as atheists. So I'm going to use the example of a guy called Islam al-Bahiri in Egypt. He basically is a TV host, and he is questioning Sunnah. He's questioning the Hadith. He's questioning the Bukhari, basically, specifically. And he went to jail for that. He was put to jail just not questioning the Quran, just saying that some of the Hadith is not correct. So he's getting the atheist treatment in Muslim countries, even though that he doesn't declare himself as an atheist. He's saying, I'm Muslim, I believe in Islam, I believe in Quran. I just think that there are certain things in Hadith that should be reviewed and looked at and maybe cleaned up a little bit, because there's some crazy stuff in there. Like Hadith is really, really bad. Quran has some, but Hadith is just ridiculous. You cannot believe the stuff in there. And I don't want to go through the details of that right now, unless you want to talk about it. But just for saying the Hadith is not correct, he had been put to jail. Now, that's for people who still believe in Islam. People who say we don't believe, they can't do that. That's a crime in 13 countries. Some of them, they will cut your head off just for not believing that a book that is full of mistakes, scientific, logical, mathematical, ethical, you name it, all sorts of mistakes. And I can go through that if you want. But book with all these mistakes, if you say that this book is not the creation of a divine being, it's not the creation of the creator of the universe who created the galaxies, if you say that, they cut your head off. So there's an alliance here that needs to be had, because both people who believe in Islam but want to make it better and people who have left Islam completely, we have a common goal. The common goal is to abolish blasphemy laws, to be able to speak freely, so we can either make Islam better or, for people who don't want to believe, not believe freely. I mean, anybody can believe anything they want. I'm an atheist, but I don't mind if anyone wants to believe. That's their choice. It's my issue is if you come and say, oh, you can't say that. You can't say this about Islam because it hurts my feelings. Islam and religion does more than hurt people's feelings. There are real consequences for people. There's domestic violence consequences from ayahs in the Quran that allow a husband to hit his wife. There are consequences for inheritance, for, a man gets double inheritance of the woman, and a lot more issues. So we need to be able to speak about these problems directly in order to fix them. If we keep avoiding talking about that subject, we're never going to get fixed. So that's, the practical alliance for both people who want to make Islam better and people who just don't want to believe in Islam anymore. They don't need it. We need to work together in order to remove the laws that prohibit free discussion about Islam and other religions, not just Islam. Because in the United States, we have a big problem with fundamentalist Christianity. And that's something that we are working with other groups who, for ex-Christians and ex-Jews towards, it's not just only about Islam, it's all about all religions, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, practical issues. We have freedom of speech. We have equality issues. We have anti-Muslim racism. There's real racism in America against Muslims. And that's something that both ex-Muslims and current Muslims face. When I go through airport security, they don't let me through because I'm an atheist. My name is still Ibrahim Abdullah, and I'm going to still be stopped there and get the special treatment. And it's okay. I'm not going to, people say, well, why don't you tell them that you don't believe? Because if there's a racist guy who's going to treat me like a Muslim, then I'm a Muslim. Because I am a Muslim. And in many ways, it's not a it's not a lie that I'm saying that I'm Muslim. I really am Muslim in certain ways, because these are my people, and I care about Muslims, and I care about the future of Muslim countries, and I want to make it better. We have an advantage in the United States of America that is not in anywhere else in the world. And I use this first example that the European Court of Human Rights ruled in October 2018 that an Austrian woman's conviction for calling Muhammad a pedophile did not violate her freedom of speech. Now, this is I'm using this example because in the last conference we had in Detroit, we had 4 speakers on the panel, and when the question was asked, "What do you think about this?" none of them thought that was incorrect. All the speakers on the Muslimish panel, a group for ex-Muslims and secular Muslims, all 4 speakers did not see anything wrong with the European Court's rule. I see something wrong, because Muhammad, when he was 50 years old, married a 9-year-old girl. Okay? Now, some of you, this is in Muslim sources. This is not like Christian or Jewish. This is from Muslim sources. So technically, that's what a pedophile does. So if you're gonna, I understand that there are some cultural contexts and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, he did do that. So you cannot put somebody in jail for saying that he's a pedophile. That's ridiculous. In the United States of America, we can't say that. Apparently in Europe, you can. Apparently in Europe, which we consider like the free world, you cannot say that. So we have a unique advantage here. We have an American advantage. We have the best country in the world for freedom of speech. We have lower risk of terrorist attacks, because if you go to London, if you go to Berlin, if you go anywhere in Europe, you go to Amsterdam, you're going to find real extreme Muslims. They're real extreme groups. And they are in charge. Like I said, in Speaker's Corner in London, the space that's supposed to be for free speech, it's been taken over by terrorist Islamic groups. Terrorist Islamic groups. These groups don't exist in the United States. So we have a unique freedom that we need to take advantage of. U.S. influences the policy of many Muslim countries, and that's a very tricky one, because we want to be able to change blasphemy laws, but at the same time, we don't want to enable warmongers, because there is in this country a lot of people who just want to go to war and bomb Muslim countries all the time, and we don't want that. We want to abolish blasphemy laws. We want to but it's a very tricky thing. That's why we have not really done anything on that front yet, and there is a lot of indecisiveness within the group about what is it exactly that needs to be done on that front. American challenges. U.S. foreign policy typically supports moderate Islamists. I don't think there's such a thing as moderate Islamists. I think if you're an Islamist, you believe in that ideology, you think that Islam should rule the world and that, there should be no countries and no borders, which I agree with no countries and no borders part. I just don't agree with the Islam should rule the world part. And if you come from that mindset, I don't think there's any common ground that we can work with. Because if you want Islam, if you want Sharia law to be the law of the land, we cannot be allies with these groups. Another problem we have is that religion and religious ideology is still viewed positively in this country. Unlike Europe, people still respect religion here. So that's another challenge that we have in America. Liberal, low expectations. There isn't, all the liberals, Democrats, they have this low expectations of Muslim communities, low expectations of Muslim countries. They think, they don't really need freedom of speech. And on the other hand, we have unwanted Christian interest that we shut down in Muslimish. We don't want that, because we get a lot of Christian groups who think, oh, these are people who left Islam, let's invite them to Jesus. And I'm like, no, this is not what we're trying to do here. In my opinion, Christianity is a far less intelligent religion than Islam. But I get rid of that support very easily. That's not a problem. Work in progress. We are going to have meetups and meetup groups in every major city in the US. This is going to happen. We will do that. We're already on our way to do that. We want a majority women board, because I feel that the ex-Muslim or the secular Muslim cause should be a women's cause. We were close to that goal. We're a little bit far from it now, but we're going to get there. And I was just telling Iman that I feel that when I want something, I just put it out there in the world and it happens. And that's what I'm doing right now. We want our executive board to be majority women because we feel that, there's a lot of women's issues within Islam, and I think we need a majority women board. Resources, referrals, and support. We want to be able to provide the support to our members and people who are secular, the same support that the Muslim Brotherhood provides for their members. Support with housing, if we can find housing resources, support with lawyers. CARE is a group that I'm not a fan of, but they do a lot of good work in helping Muslims who are facing prejudice and are facing problems with the U.S. government. They provide lawyers for them. We are starting there. We are starting with asylum seekers. We've started that already. We're helping by putting people in touch with each other to help each other. But we want to have better connections with nonprofit organizations that provide housing, that provide lawyers, that provide other resources. That is the goal. We need to be practical and we need to be effective. We don't want to just talk about things. We want to change things in real life on the ground. Staff member, we need a staff member. This is a completely 100% volunteer organization. And I think we'll come to the point where there's a lot of things that need to be done that we need a staff member to do. We're just not there yet. It's on the things that we need to achieve. We need to produce educational scientific content because scientific content in Arabic and Urdu, in French, I guess there's content out there in French anyway. But we need to be able to, provide for people, not just our members, content that will explain things in a scientific way, because there's very few resources out there for people. And lobbying, and that's the last one. I put it in there last because within the group internally, we have not agreed yet about what is it that we want to do. But we feel that it's, if we have to take advantage of being in the United States, being in a country that actually influences decisions in Muslim countries. I'm Egyptian. I've seen the Egyptian revolution happen in Egypt, and I've seen how, all it had to take for a 30-year-old ruler to leave power is for Americans to tell him to leave. And he left. And when he left, there was a huge vacuum. There was about a year of complete anarchy, freedom that was not unprecedented. And all the views came to light. The extreme Muslim, the atheist views, and everybody for a sudden, so that there's a lot of opinions out there. But the only people that were organized enough to take advantage of that vacuum were the Muslim Brotherhood. They were able to hijack the revolution, is what we said. And why? Because seculars were not organized. Seculars did not have a group. Seculars did not have goals. So the only ones that were organized on the ground and were able to take advantage of the vacuum were the Muslim Brotherhood. We should not let that happen again. We should be ready when there's the next revolution, which I think is going to happen in 2030 in Egypt. When the next revolution happens, we need to be ready for it. We can't let the Brotherhood take over and then cry over, they took over. Well, who let them take over? We were not organized. Now, before I finish, I want you to know why I'm talking to you today, what I want from you, because I want something from you. I want you to help us. Tell your Muslimish friends we need to grow in membership. We have groups now and we need to start new groups in every major city. I want you to tell your Muslimish friends, people who are secular, who are not extremists, who have views that don't fall within the rigid framework of Islamic religion. So anyone who fits that description, please tell them about the group and invite them to come, because we want membership to grow. Share our online content, connect us with other secular groups and organizations, and share with us your actionable ideas. Actionable is the key word here. Things that we can actually do. Because, one of the problems that I've seen in a lot of organizations is that people just want to sit there and talk about issues without trying to find solutions for them. We want to find a solution. We want to achieve things. We want to change the status quo that's been, happening here and in Muslim countries for a long, long time. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming, and visit our website. And I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to a discussion with you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ibrahim. And thank you once again to Muslimish for sponsoring and supporting this event. So what I mentioned earlier about working together with progressive Muslims, we are very privileged to have with us today from the Boston chapter of Muslims for Progressive Values, Kandil Javed. Kandil Javed is an enthusiastic organizer for Muslims for Progressive Values of Boston, with a focus around community building. He advocates for equal human rights, social justice, and inclusion in the greater Boston area. He will be speaking about the mission and vision of Muslims for Progressive Values. Please welcome Kandil Javed.
Thanks, Owen, and thanks for organizing this, and thanks to Muslimish for coordinating with us to get progressive Muslims here on the panel. My name is Kandil. Are you okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. My name is Kandil Javed, and I'm one of the organizers for Muslims for Progressive Values here in Boston area. As Muslims for Progressive Values, we advocate for equal human rights, inclusion, and social justice in the U.S. and around the world. Our vision is to rebuild an inclusive Muslim community with the freedom of conscience and allowing safe spaces for Muslims to be themselves. Our main goal is to really allow Muslims to be who they are and still be in a space where they can practice and their faith and be who they are, right? So currently, I apologize that I don't have a PowerPoint presentation like Ibrahim does. It was more of a last minute putting together. So we have chapters on grassroots level. We have chapters in 7 major cities in the U.S. and also with the representation internationally and nationally in the UN. Our focus for the group is to really advocate for women's rights, LGBTQIA rights, and the rights of Muslims with free thinking, critical thinking, right? So I think a great point that Ibrahim brought up earlier was that there is no room for people to be who they are in a lot of Muslim communities. Our narrative basically focuses on the egalitarian principles of Islam and building off of that, and how to look back and look at the true teachings of the context and separate the cultural aspects of the 7th century government from it, and really practice the faith to that within this 21st century. So on grassroots level, a lot of work that we do is around organizing and providing spaces where people can come and practice their faith without having to be to go through the gender biases that they might see in a mainstream traditionalist ideology or a traditionalist mosque. There is researchers that have published our work throughout the world. One of the biggest ones is Pew Research that shows, really highlights the progress that we have made within the Muslim communities since 2007. So our organization was founded by Ani Zonneveld in LA, in Los Angeles. And from 2007 to 2017, Pew Research has conducted a statistical analysis on LGBTQIA and women's rights in Islam and Muslim communities, and how that has progressed because of Muslims for Progressive Values. So in 2007, about 37% of Muslims were on the borderline of progressiveness to be accepting of LGBTQIA and women in leadership position. And in 2017, after a decade, that number was increased to 54%. So our advocacy work has done many, really has helped people who have had progressive mindset, right? So if they're in a traditionalist community, they don't have that luxury to speak up, right? To really be living their life truly to who they are. And it's like people have their identity outside of the, excuse me, I'm gonna lift this up a little bit. Okay, sorry. So people have their identity or their lifestyle outside of the traditionalist community, but when they go to the traditionalist communities, they go in like a cover, right? So they're not themselves. They're not really, they have to put on this certain performance to be a part of that community. Otherwise they're often considered outliers, or they live on the margins of the community because of who they are, right? And there is a spectrum of that's seen. So some of the other things that we do as an organization is we're the only Muslim organization that's been around since 2007 that has done work for women's rights overseas. In Tunisia, we have done a lot of work with providing women with the resources to own their own businesses and to really go into the communities that are often oppressing women for, from going to school or getting education because it's a male-dominant culture. They're afraid that, providing women with the opportunity to educate themselves is probably, they find it threatening, right? So it's a male-dominant culture, like Ibrahim mentioned. It often puts women and minorities within the group at the margins to really stay there and not ask for what a human should deserve, right? So a lot of work, and I am very proud of the work that we have put into this organization, that Ani has put into this organization over the last 12 years. And the effects of it are spreading, right? So now we see, I think we were the first organization that had women-led congregation prayer, right? So, or mixed gender prayers. Like, why do you go to a traditionalist mosque and then there is a huge section for males to pray, but then there is like this whole little dark section for women all the way in the back to pray, right? So there is a lot of gender segregation. And our organization has been the first one out there who's been doing this work to really reduce that gender segregation, allowing those inclusive spaces for people to be who they are, right? Without the gender biases, without caring about the fact that you have a partner that's not Muslim, or, you're married to somebody that's not Muslim, or, without having those segregations within. So on grassroots level, there is a lot of, we do events, we do prayer groups, we do, work with the local organizations to really build that inclusion, right? So I'm very happy to be here, and oftentimes we get this label that like we're not Muslim enough, which is very nuanced to me, because I think that whatever my belief is, whatever my faith is, it's between me and my creator, right? And after studying and researching Islam and, coming from a scientific background, looking at it from a critical perspective and also looking at it what, are a lot of our male imams that are taught in a very biased way in whatever Muslim communities that they're from, right? So oftentimes I hear in South Asian communities, talks about hadith, and these hadiths are in Urdu, and then they're just these pretty little meme-looking like pictures that are, either homophobic or are telling women how to dress up, right? Or are saying things that are making it sound like as if Islam is the only faith that's out there, right? The only. So that ideology is really, it really takes away the true teachings of the context in its nature, right? So it's interesting because we have never seen. In my life, I've never seen a space that is so inclusive that it doesn't care if you follow Sunni, Shia, Ahmadi, whatever your subsection identity that you belong to, or whatever your faith affiliation is. But this is a space where we don't care. We don't care what background of faith you come from, right? You're here, you identify as Muslim, you belong here, right? That's what our motive is, and all we say is be yourself and be a Muslim. Thank you.
Thank you, Kandil, and thanks for having Muslims for Progressive Values participate as well. Without further ado, our third speaker is one of the leading lights of the Boston chapter, Muslimish, Eman Akam. She was born in Saudi Arabia to Sudanese parents and emigrated to the United States as a teenager. She holds a PhD in chemistry and is currently a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. Iman has a passion for science, education, outreach, and the advancement and equal representation of marginalized communities in STEM fields. She will be speaking about implicit bias and the status of women in Islam. Please welcome Iman.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Sahan, for that awesome introduction, and thanks for organizing all of this. It's been really great so far. So I'm going to talk to you today about gender hierarchies in Islam and the fact that we just need to deal with them. So before I start this talk, I just want to preface it by saying a few things. First, I'll start out with this quote by Majid Nawaz, where he says, in an open society, no idea can be above scrutiny, just as no people should be beneath dignity. And I really think we have to keep that in mind, especially when we have conversations like this one that are very difficult and very charged. We can have these discussions, we can criticize ideology, but we should never dehumanize people. And this is especially true in the West, where in the case of Islam, we've put Islam on a different pedestal. When it comes to just criticizing Islam, so we tend to issues that we or subjects that we have issues with on a moral level in different contexts. We make exceptions for Islam when it comes to those same issues. So I think that's very problematic. We have to stop that. Too low? We really need to stop that. We need to put Islam on the same moral. We need to hold it to the same level as all other religions and all other ideologies. So, as I mentioned, we can criticize ideas without demeaning or dehumanizing people, and that's what we should be doing, especially in order for us to advanced society. And I think what I wanted to mention also was that we need to stop using the term Islamophobia. We're really talking about anti-Muslim bigotry. That's the different thing. So we should we should be clear when we're talking about anti-Muslim bigotry. We're dehumanizing people, and that's not the goal of Muslimish, and that's not the goal of most people, I think, that are trying to advance society. As people who have deep roots in Islam, we're very heavily invested in the well-being of Muslim women, Muslims and Muslim women, especially. In my case, everywhere we have Muslim mothers, Muslim daughters, friends, and so on. So we deeply care about the interests of Muslim women. So we really need to have this conversation. It's a necessary one. It's a very difficult one, but we really need to have it. We need to face our issues in order to effectively address them. And so, as Sohan mentioned, I am a scientist by profession. I'm a chemist, so I don't produce any research in the field of social science. But I have some strong interests in gender equality and especially representation of minorities and historically marginalized communities in the sciences. But so this gender equality in Islam just kind of fits right in with my extracurricular interests. And one thing I've been keeping track of over the years is global gender gap reports, especially this one by the World Economic Forum. I think it's one of the more thorough ones. It measures gender equality in about 140 countries. It changes from year to year, but the last year was 149 countries. And it does so based on 4 parameters, which I think is the most thorough of all the other gender gap reports that I've seen. So they base this gender gap, in addition to health and survival and educational attainment, it also takes into consideration economic participation and political participation and empowerment. So in the report, countries are scored from 0 to 1, with 1 being parity or equal gender equality. And so this is a summary of the report, where all 149 countries are listed, and with the smallest gender gap up here. This country that you can't see is Iceland, and the largest gender gap over here, which is Yemen. What I've done over the years is I've just kind of pointed out where the Muslim countries lie on this spectrum. So the weighted global average is here. I just laid it on a side so it's easier to see. The largest gender gaps are on the left here, and the smallest gender gaps are on the right. I guess, yeah. So I've actually broken down the Muslim majority countries based on the constitutional involvement of Islam. So these first 5 countries are Islamic states, and then these countries that are in Burgundy, pointed out in Burgundy, are countries where Islam is the official state religion. Then these are the secular states, and then finally there are only a couple of countries that have no clear association of the constitution with Islam. So when I look at this as a scientist, I see a clear pattern where Muslim countries are clustered, where the lower or the larger gender gaps are. So this obviously is very alarming. And what's even more alarming is when you look at the details of this report. So 84% of Muslim majority countries surveyed fall below the global average. 60% of Muslim majority countries in the survey fall in the bottom 17% of ranks. I'm going to say that again. 60% of the Muslim majority countries in the survey are in the bottom 17%. The 5 countries with the highest gender gap are all Muslim majority, and then 14 out of the 15 lowest or countries with the highest gender gap are all Muslim majority countries. So, as hard as it is to believe, it's actually been getting better over the years. So there is progress. We're making progress, but it's still pretty bad in 2018. So these countries are countries from all over the world, from all different continents, all different regions. They speak different. There's multiple languages spoken in all these countries. There are a variety of cultures, of course, and the only thing that's uniting all these countries that are clustered here at the bottom is the religion. So I think we really do need to take a look at what's going on in the religion. So some things that we can agree on is that the Quran defines Islam. I think no one would disagree with that Muslims follow the Quran and Quran defines Islam. There aren't even that many surveys or much scientific data that shows this, because I think it's pretty undisputed. But if you want to see some data, this is by the Pew Research Fund, which the Pew Research Center surveyed, in this case, Muslims in sub-Saharan Africa, and most of them agree that the Quran is the word of God. And another thing that unites Muslims, of course, I should say most Muslims, but across the world, is that their belief in Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. And we also know that Muslims from a variety of countries, a variety of regions, agree that religion is very important to them. So Islam is very important to them. So because of this, I really do think that we really need to take a deep look into Islam and the Quran. And I think it's not like a new topic that there are Quranic verses that establish women as second-class citizens. There are many of them, but I'm just going to mention two today. One which places value on the testimony of men versus women. And also the second verse that I'm going to talk about is the hierarchy within a marriage, hierarchy of men and women in marriage. So this verse, which is from chapter 2, it's verse 282. So this is the Arabic version, and then this is the Sahih International Translation. And it's a lengthy verse, so I'm just here highlighting the part that I'm talking about, that says, "And bring to witness 2 witnesses from among your men, and if there are not 2 men available, then a man and 2 women from those whom you accept as witnesses, so that if one of the women errs, then the other can remind her." So I think it's pretty clear that in this verse establishes that the testimony of one man is equal to that of 2 women. And some apologists have said that this is in the case only of a contract for debt. But regardless, I think the point is clear that the testimony of 2 women equals that of 1 man. The other verse, which is, I think, the most problematic and it's the most difficult to talk about probably, is the verse in chapter 4, verse 34, which says that men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other and what they spend for maintenance from their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them, then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand. So as I mentioned, this is a very problematic verse, and a lot of people have a lot of Muslim scholars have done a lot of work to reinterpret or to re-examine this verse and kind of soften the edges of the message there. So here I'm just showing a variety of explanations that I've come across over the years. Probably the most common, and the one that when I was in school in Saudi Arabia, this is the one that we were told, which is that the punishment should be the corporal punishment should be light and should be done with an object no larger than a toothbrush. And recently I heard from a speaker that was here at MIT say that it wouldn't even be considered domestic abuse in the US, which I just thought completely missed the point. But anyway, I think no matter how we interpret this verse, no matter what we say about it, the message is still clear. There is still an established hierarchy, which is that men are in charge of women, men are placed above women. And I think this holds no matter how we see this no matter what we say about this verse, this holds. So I think there are a few things that we need to do that in order for us to really address this problem. And first, I think we have to face it. So we really cannot delude ourselves into thinking that these verses are not interpreted in the way that make women second-class citizens, because the reality is they are. No matter what we say in the West, no matter how we try to reinterpret these verses, the truth is that the majority of the world, the majority of the Muslim world, see that Islam there's only one interpretation for Islam. So this is, again, research from the Pew Research Center. It's a survey that asked Muslims from a variety of regions across the world. And these are tens of thousands of Muslims that were asked about the interpretation of Islam. And the question is asking is if there's only one interpretation of Islam. And you can see that the majority of Muslims agree that there's only one interpretation of Islam. And this interpretation is one that puts women, places women as second-class citizens. This manifests itself in a variety of ways. So besides this, the fact that the Muslim countries cluster at the bottom of this gender gap report, we see this manifests itself in a variety of other ways. So, for instance, in one study that was done by Alexander and coworkers, they looked at patriarchal values and how they are held, and they found that Muslim. So I'm sorry, it's so small. This says Muslim, and then this is broken down by Sunni and Shia. But they found that Muslims have the highest patriarchal values and views. Also, in this survey, where Muslims were asked if they agree that a wife should always obey her husband, the majority of Muslims across many regions agree that the woman should always obey her husband. A wife should always obey her husband. We know that this actually manifests itself on a cultural, on a societal, and on an individual level, because consistently patriarchal. So in the same study by Alexander, they looked at how this looks in Muslim majority and Muslim majority and Muslim or non-Muslim societies. So this first bar is Muslims that were surveyed that live in a Muslim society, and this is a scale for patriarchal values. So the higher the scale, the more strongly patriarchal values are held. So this is Muslims who live in a Muslim society, and then these are non-Muslims that live in a Muslim society. Here are Muslims that live in a non-Muslim society, and non-Muslims that live in a non-Muslim society. So in each case, Muslims have a stronger patriarchal values, but people in Muslim societies in general have a stronger patriarchal values than non-Muslims. Another way that this, which I find this to be the most disturbing, this group collected data from several surveys over the years from several countries, and in the survey, people were asked whether or not they support public gender equality. So this is the percent of people that agreed. So here with this red line, this dashed red line, I'm showing the 50% mark. And you can see that with only a couple of exceptions, most people are not in support of gender equality. I think if this doesn't deeply disturb you, then you're not understanding all the implications, because this is exactly what brainwashing looks like. Because the lighter gray bars are women and the darker gray bars are men, and they both don't support gender equality. I think that's just it. I think it's pretty disturbing. I'll come back to this a little bit later. So I think it's very clear that the way that Islam is practiced in the majority of the world places women as second-class citizens. Another thing that we have to do to face this problem is that we really cannot compare the status of Muslim women in the U.S. to Muslim women in Muslim majority countries. We just can't do that, because we know that the way that Islam is practiced is very different in those two societies. So, for example, we know for the majority of Muslims in the U.S. And globally, when they're asked the question if they believe in one God and Prophet Muhammad, they agree. So 96% of U.S. Muslims and 97% of Muslims globally agree with this statement. But if we look at the second question, which is whether or not the Quran should be read literally, word for word, only 50% of U.S. Muslims agree with this, but 80% of Muslims, in this case in sub-Saharan Africa, I think this is the only region that was surveyed in this case, but 80% of those Muslims think that Quran should be taken literally word for word. We also know that there's differences in the way that Islam should be interpreted. So U.S. Muslims, only 37% say that there's only one true way for interpreting Islam, while 63% of Muslims globally say that there's only one way to interpret Islam. In this survey, which I thought was interesting, this looked at 4 Muslim majority countries, but also compared to the U.S. And so this first question here is, if there was a job shortage, men should get the priority. 77% of Muslims in those 4 countries agreed with that statement, and only 10% of Muslims in the United States agreed with that statement. So you can clearly see there's just a vast difference in that view. And the second question was whether or not men make better political leaders. 75% of Muslims in those countries say that they do, and only 22% of Muslims in the U.S. So the way that Islam and Muslims the way that Muslims practice Islam is very different in the West compared to in Muslim majority countries. And I already showed you this data, so this also shows that. Okay, so another thing that we tend to do in the West is we tend to focus on one aspect of gender equality when we're talking about the Muslim majority countries, which is that of education. So over the past maybe 10 years or so, there's been just an explosion of articles that talk about the fact that there are more women than men in the sciences or getting STEM degrees in Muslim majority countries. But this fails to account for this phenomenon, which was called by these researchers the gender equality paradox, in which women in gender equal countries are more likely to pursue careers out of just general interest, while in Muslim majority countries, women are pursuing careers in order to pursue financial freedom. So we really can't look at just education as a parameter. We really need more scientific studies that focus on the psychology of Muslim women, because I think there's just not enough research. The research that there is really paints just a horrifically disturbing picture. So, for example, this study that looked at Muslim women in Indonesia and in Norway, the Indonesian Muslims responded that according to most Indonesian respondents, Islamic norms prescribe male leadership and allow for husbands to beat a disobedient wife, and this is regarded as crucial for a wife's destiny after death. And this was not the response of the Norwegian Muslim women. So anyway, I do think that we don't talk enough about this problem because it's very charged. And what happens a lot in the U.S. is that our message gets ground to dust between the mortar and pestle that is the Western conservatives and liberals. Liberals hijack our message to push anti-Muslim bigotry, and liberals label us as bigots, as anti-Muslim bigots. And I think that needs to stop. So we just need to face our problems, and that's all I have to say about this. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eman. So, also from Muslims from Progressive Values, we're very privileged to have with us another speaker. Ehsan Leki is an American immigrant from Morocco, a survivor, and a local social justice activist. In the wake of the financial crisis, her commitment to justice drove her to take on Wall Street as a regulator at the Federal Reserve. She saw the largest banks again putting us in jeopardy with corrupt and complicit politicians unwilling to hold them accountable. That reignited her fire to bring integrity and security to our economy. Ihsan is organizing to amplify the voices of communities from Brookline to Fall River to fight for the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and universal free education. She will be speaking about her faith journey and how to strengthen our communities. Please welcome Ihsan.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. My name is Ihsan. I was born in Morocco. My father was a public school teacher, and my mother was a farmer, came from a farmer family. I was very lucky to be born in such a family with great values of integrity and hard work and compassion. And those values still lead me until this day. My journey of faith started since I was a little girl. I always wanted to follow the rules. I wanted to, stand up for what's right and stand up for the marginalized. When I was a little girl at school, I would always want to help those who are in need. I would want to, stop my friends from bullying others, and bring school supplies to those who cannot afford them. When I was about 13, I lost my father to stroke because we couldn't afford to treat his heart condition. And before he passed away, I had a desire to wear the scarf. I've seen my mom wear it. I liked it my whole life. But I also really was disgusted by being treated as an object every time I'm outside, being harassed by men everywhere, teenagers who are following their leads. And I thought that having the scarf on would communicate something, would bridge some respect. So I came up to my father before he passed away and I said, I really want to wear the scarf. And he said to me, you're too young for that. You want to do it when you're sure of it. You want to do it and not take it off. So why don't you wait? Wait until you go to high school. So here I am going to high school. My father is not there. And I wanted to stand up to that promise. So I chose to wear the scarf. And I went to high school and I was being harassed the whole time. It's like if I didn't have a scarf on, it didn't matter to people. Some said I framed my face and now my eyes are giving off my beauty. So maybe I should have considered covering that as well. I started wearing boys' clothes. I started hanging out, making boyfriends only, because I felt that if the men were my friends, they wouldn't hit on me. If I'm clear that I only want friendship, that's not going to happen. And so I also started to be excluded from parties. Any house parties I don't get invited to on the premise that I'm too religious, that I'm not going to want to be I'm not going to participate in the fun, and that maybe I'm not fun enough. So here I am, not girl enough, not Muslim enough, not progressive enough, not kid enough, and just trying to figure my way through life. When I started going to college in Morocco, one of my brothers became a bit too serious about the scarf. So if a teensy bit of my hair is showing, I would receive a hit to my neck and I would be yelled at for not making sure that the little hairs in the front are covered properly. And this is the same person who, was dating his wife for 10 years before they got married, and who, to me seemed very progressive and very open about having relationships in life as we explore who we want to choose to bond with. Yet some of that, between his beliefs and the social pressure and the fear of repercussions and reputational, the reputational repercussions of our family came before my rights as a human being. When I had the chance to come to the US, I took off my scarf, and he didn't know. I wanted to simply fit in and not be noticed, and I didn't want anyone to know what my faith is. I was in an exploration path of what Islam means to me. I was born in a Muslim country, raised on these values, being told to do this or do that, being told that education is a human right and that we ought to research, we ought to learn so that we can get closer to understanding the things around us, the creation. So my path to Islam, my true path to my faith and my spirituality really started in America, in having that freedom to question, the freedom to criticize, the freedom to say, you know what, I only want to, right at this time in my life, I feel closer to this part of my faith. And maybe I haven't had enough experiences to understand other things, but will follow my life and see where that path will lead me. I remember walking in the street for the first time wearing a miniskirt in New York City and feeling so liberated that nobody harassed me on the street. Doesn't matter what I'm wearing. People had respect for me. But I also started to realize that some of the sisters who wore the scarf were standing up to hate. Were standing up to people who would tell them, oh, you're Muslim, then you're not worthy, or your values aren't good, or, just deciding for what they believe without actually asking them or approaching them, or even allowing them to live that life of liberty that we enjoy in the US. Wear the scarf, don't wear it, it's your body, you're a woman, do what you want with it. Let your rights of freedom lead you in life. So, when people ask me about the whole scarf situation, I don't know, maybe one day I will decide to wear it. But what I would stand up and say is, don't follow hate, follow love, follow unity. We are here to make sure that we respect each other's liberties and that we fight for each other's liberties. That's the only way that we can use our brains, use our minds to get to what is right for us and for our society as a whole. So, in the face of the New Zealand attacks, one thing that brought me really closer to how amazing it is to be American is that I found solidarity with folks in the progressive Muslim group, Muslims for Progressive Values. And I also found solidarity in my sisters at the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom. And the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom are, women from both the Jewish and Muslim faith, from all of the spectrums within those two faiths, who get together and we bring that human part so that we're not looking at each other as the other. So that we start to eat together, bring a meal from your home, meet at one of us's home once a month, and just having these discussions. When the New Zealand attacks happened, they reached out to me on the same day. And they said, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What can we do for you? We understand what's going on. We have been growing with the knowledge that there are powers who want to divide people so that they can conquer. And we want to help you. They came with me to a mosque in Wayland, and they prayed by my side. Now let me contrast that with what happened in Morocco when I took my husband for the first time. We were married here for 3 years, and we finally could afford to make the trip. So we go, and we're in Fez, and we wanted to get into one of the oldest mosques in that city. And my husband was questioned at the door. They asked for a certificate of Islam, which growing up in a Muslim country, I have never heard of. That you need to have a certificate to show what your faith is. And so he stood there and said, oh, well, we didn't bring the certificate with us. We do have one that's been issued by a mosque in Jersey City when we got married, but we don't have it here. Can I still come in? I'm a Muslim and I would like to come in for prayer. They asked him to say the Shahada, to witness. And he said it in English. And they asked him to say it in Arabic. And he couldn't say the whole thing in Arabic. He doesn't know much Arabic. And I said, I'll translate for him. Can we please get in? And they looked at me and said, well, lady, you're going to need to cover up. You're wearing a dress. You need to wear something long, and you cannot step at the door of this mosque without wearing and covering and all that. So I'm not the quiet kind. I was loud. I made a mess. And I said, hey, this isn't Islam. Islam is about welcoming. Islam is about peace. Islam is about anyone, whether you believe or you don't believe, or you're exploring, or you're atheist, or whatever however you identify, you're an LGBTQ, or you're a woman, or you don't know, or you don't want to know, whatever your identity is, in all of that spectrum, doesn't deny you coming into a mosque or exploring a faith. And that is what Islam is about. That is what my values are about. So eventually we were able to make it to that mosque that one time. But here in America, to be able to show up with Jewish sisters and no one would even question whether they're allowed to pray with us or not pray with us, or where would they stand to pray, that was Islam for me. That was standing up for justice for me. That was America for me. And that is why I'm working so hard to make sure we preserve these rights, at least starting here in America. As we know, what we do in America affects the rest of the world. That is a reality. So we need to stand up to our values here. We need to reach out across the aisle. We need to reach out to our neighbors, bring it into our homes. We need to reach out to all the marginalized communities, right? So when we hear hate anywhere, that touches every one of us. There's no safety until we're all safe, right? So in all of this story, and in every story, one looks for who's the villain, right? Who's the villain? When the Muslims get attacked, are the Jewish people the villain? When the black people get attacked, are the white people the villain? And when the LGBTQ get attacked, are straight people the villain? And when people who have disabilities are attacked, are the people with no disabilities the villain? We are being attacked as a people to be divided and to point the blame finger at each other so that we can be easy to be conquered. And the conqueror, in all these, majority Muslim countries that my friend had shown before, Who is the conqueror? The conqueror are those who are at the top of the money's power. That's the conqueror. The conquerors are dictators who sit at the top and say, if we put people against each other, they won't be paying attention. And that, to lead you to why this is very, very important, is that my work at the Federal Reserve, when I chose that is going to be my mission, is to go into the big banks and regulate and discover the lies that they lie to us about every day. That work was led by seeing how divisive they were to our people. When I saw that my students, student friends at Boston University were no longer able to afford their tuition, when I saw that their parents were homeless in the face of the crisis, right? When I saw that people in Louisiana were suffering after the math of Hurricane Katrina, and I saw that the insurance companies were not helping home them, right? When I saw that women in America are being underpaid compared to men, when I see every day that here in America I could not decide on whether I want to keep a pregnancy or not, right? These are the questions that come to mind when I think of money power. Who is at gain? And once you start to pay attention and to realize that if you want to change society, you have to rise to power. You have to make people your power. Then you cannot afford to be divisive. Your responsibility becomes to unite the communities, right? If you see something wrong, go on and fix it with peace and fix it from a place of love. Educate people. If you're worried about walking outside and saying, hey, I'm a Muslim, and you're worried that hate will get to you in America, then go to churches, go to synagogues, go speak to atheist groups, go to secular societies and speak about what your values are. Because what you do right then and there is that you tell people that you are a human being worthy of human rights. Your human rights of expressing yourself. This conversation that we're having here today, we could not have it in so many other countries, including the country that I came from. People get jailed for this. My uncle in the 70s was a poet, and he wrote about political poetry. He wrote about justice, and he disappeared to the secret police for 3 days and came back beat and raped and never himself again. Last time I remember my uncle was when I was 16 in high school, and I was walking outside with those male friends I've told you about, and he started calling me names and running after me naked. And that was the last time I've seen him. Am I mad at him? Of course not. But I am fired up to make sure that the safety that we share in this land continues to exist, that we fight for this safety every single day. And we ought to understand that the only way we're going to be able to ensure this safety is through uniting and strengthening our communities. And let's get actionable. Let's get actionable. Let's start thinking about where can we get strong. We can get strong if we're no longer broken economically. We can get strong if you don't have to think about tuition because you want to get an education. We can get strong if you don't have to think about going bankrupt because now you need surgery. We can get strong if we don't have to worry about having more children because we're worried we're not going to be able to have clean water or clean air for them, right? We can get strong if we push our people to be our representation in government. So I truly, I am really happy, and this has been an honor for me to be here. This has been my American dream, to be able to stand right here and speak with people from all of the spectrum of Islam and also from other religions and beliefs. This is my American dream, is to be able to have this voice. And I will never stop. I will always speak. And I invite you to do the same, to keep the conversation going, to open up, listen, learn from others, and fight for what is right. At the end of the day, it's those values: compassion, integrity, hard work, that bring so many of us together. So I invite you to get strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Isan. So our last speaker before the break is also a leading light of our local chapter, Said Benjebli. He's a human rights activist, blogger, and blogger from Morocco, living in the United States. Through his channel, Benjebli works to empower women and promote a new global enlightenment movement that integrates Eastern wisdom and Western philosophy to liberate spirituality and morality from religion. By 2005, when he received his bachelor's degree in Islamic studies in Morocco, Benjebli had already accumulated more than 12 years as a young Islamist activist and leader. Benjebli then started blogging about many Islamic topics, becoming a pioneer among Arabic bloggers. He also founded and was elected the president of the Moroccan Bloggers Association. In 2010, Benjebli was named by the French magazine L'Express among the 100 most influential people of Morocco as a leader in the fight for digital freedom of expression. In 2011, during the Arab Spring revolutions, Benjebli was the founder of the 20 February movement, which mobilized protests in Morocco and prompted the king to change the political system and constitution. He will be speaking about the dynamics of Islamic extremism. Please welcome Said.
Suhan, to presentation. Hello. I will talk about Islamic extremism from a psychological point of view. There is many approaches to Islamic extremism, but I think we need that too, because Islamic extremism is not just about terrorism. Terrorism is for sure Islamic extremism, but that's what we know about Islamic extremism. But there is other types of Islamic extremism that has more danger and more impact on the world. Like, this is Muslim Brotherhood. They are not jihadists, but they became jihadists later. And this is women. Women don't have right to travel alone, but they have right to fight. So they can't drive a car, but they can use the Kalashnikov. So Islamic extremism is going bigger and bigger. And as I will explain, it's not just about terrorism. There is other type of Islamic extremism that we are not aware about, like Do you see? What's freedom go to hell or democracy go to hell? Throwing gay from a young boy gay from a high building. So more throwing. This is slaves. You see, a woman, a slave woman, Yazidi woman, is cheaper than a chicken. And we have more slaves. Killing someone because they claim he is a magician, a witch, or someone who couldn't fast Ramadan, a young boy. He has been crucified because he didn't fast Ramadan. Or cutting hands, legs, stoning women. I couldn't put a real picture because it's not appropriate for to be here. We see a child killing a child because he was listening to Western music. That's his crime. And they will cut his 15 years old boy. They will cut his head. You see, monuments. I mean, archaeological monuments. Or music, burning musical instruments. Music, it's not allowed. But Hitler, God bless him, and massacred those who insult Islam, cut their heads. So that's what is coming. That's the future. If you see that, that's just someone hurting himself. It doesn't matter. But this one, that's the progress they are talking about. That's what they want to bring to the West. So we can get a bigger picture. We need to talk about those, because those who make extremism possible, and those too. I mean, countries, governments, like even Indonesia, they are whipping this woman because she gives someone a hug. That's why. Giving a hug. So they can be government, they can be presidents, they can be politicians, they can be Shia, they can be Sunnah, they can be known muftis, or they can be just someone famous on a TV channel who believe that woman must beat his wife. They can be progressive. Yeah, I think so. I think he considers himself progressive. But he rapes many women. And the problem, they still believe him. They still believe he is progressive. And we will see them talking about him. This one is using his son to show people how to beat your wife. So this is famous. Yeah, those two people, they are progressive and they are even human rights activists. But now they are defending a rapist because he is from the same side. He is a Muslim, like them. Yeah, that's what you get if you are a woman in Muslim, in Islamic country. That what you get when you are in Britain. There is some places you can't go if you are not Muslim. It's not just the mosque now. It's not just in Islamic countries. It's in Europe. And you can walk in there. You can't. Why you can't? Because Muslims are the new government there. They have their government. No music, no drinking. You need to wear the hijab and you need to be careful. Don't offend Muhammad or they will kill you. So, but how all that can happen? It starts from here. It starts from here. So this woman, she is living in Australia now. Western country, if we can say. But she is complaining because the school, there is no school for children to pray. And her son is the only Muslim child in the school. And she wants a mosque in the school. He is a child, 6 years, 5 years. But that's some kind of extremism. And he can't listen music. She said, my boy will not go to music classroom. He is not allowed. We are not allowed. And we are not allowed to celebrate Christmas. So when you talk about Christmas, don't let me know not to bring my son. And I believe she will beat her son to make him pray. Following Muhammad's words, smack them when they have 10 maybe. Yeah. Teach your children to pray when they are 7 years old and smack them lightly. No, this lightly, it's not original. Someone added. If they do not pray when they are 10 years old. So that's what they believe and that's what they do. It starts from here. You see? No, this one. You see? From here too. And they will say, we are wearing hijab by choice. Do you see any choice there for anybody? I don't see any choice. No, not for children, not for women. Nobody has a choice here. Nobody. Yeah, this young lady has no choice too. It's not lady. It's just 7 years or maybe 8 years old. I can't recognize. She isn't lady yet, but you see. Or this one, child, another child. Or this one. Extremism can be just like that. Hurting your child. Or hurting someone else. You see? Hurting your child, or sending your child to the war. How to raise a bomb suicidal child? That's extremism. Extremism, we can say, they kill the husband, the wife, the father, and the mother. They killed their own child. Now she is a teenager now. They kill her because she didn't wear hijab or because she shouted something. So that's what they kill her. So Islamic extremism is levels. It starts from someone who hurting himself, or someone who is hurting his family, or someone who is establishing a new government in London streets, or someone who is taking the government of some countries, like Muslim Brotherhood, or like what's happening in Algeria, or what's going to happen in Algeria, or Sudan, or Iran. That's a high level of extremism. But the highest is the violent extremism, the terrorism. That's the highest one because it's without border. It doesn't recognize any countries. It doesn't recognize any laws. It just they want Khilafah around the world. That's what they want. They want the Islam to conquer the world. That's what makes them happy. And that's what they will try to do. And that's what they are doing now. So, most people, they talk about extremism, but they talk just about what we can see. Behavioral extremism. But there is another kind of extremism. It's cognitive extremism. Extremism, it starts from here. It starts from the mind. There is public extremism, private extremism, so private can be in the family, can be in the group, the community, in the mosque, but there is extremist beliefs and extremist emotions, and that's what we can't see, and that's what we don't talk about, and that's what we need to talk about. So Islamic extremism is the adoption of extremist beliefs, emotions, and behaviors that content the modern value of humanism. They have their own norms, and they have their own values, and they want to share it with the world. So Islamic extremism is about abnormal or dysfunctional emotions, beliefs, or behaviors. That from psychological approach. So these abnormal emotions, beliefs, and behaviors in science is a subject of abnormal psychology. So there is 4 criteria to classify and to look to the abnormal behaviors. It's deviance, violation of the social norms, or distress, or dysfunction, or dangerousness. So, deviance, we can't rely on that, because if you are in a majority, Muslim majority countries, you are extremist. Why you are extremist? If you are atheist or progressive Muslim, you are extremist there. That's what they will say to you. That's how they will label you, and they will take you to jail. So we can't rely on that, because distress is something subjective too, but dysfunction and dangerousness, that's very important. And that's why I showed you this 5 level of extremism. So we will rely on the dangerousness as a criteria to classify the Islamic extremism as abnormal behavior. So that's the symptoms. It's practicing harmful religious or behaviors to the self or to others, or holding negative emotions toward yourself or toward others, and adopting harmful religious thought. And the explanation, the psychological explanation, is dysfunctional behaviors result from dysfunctional thoughts. That's the cognitive behavioral approach, and it's the approach that look most accurate in our case. So treatment, there is a treatment too. The cognitive behavioral approach provide explanation and provides treatment too. So the treatment based on the CB is called CBT, and CBT programs are widely used around the world and in the United States. CBT programs are widely used in many fields, including healthcare and criminal justice system. And there is strong evidence that CBT for offenders reduce crime. And so CBT programs, why we choose CBT approach and CBT programs? Because CBT can be used to help reduce Islamic extremism behavior by prevention, intervention, and conversion. Even you can talk to an extremist person and you can make him a healthy person just by talking. That's why it is important. CBT provides the means to correct flawed cognitive behavior process behind extreme behaviors for victims and offenders through individual and group therapy. So we saw some pictures. We looked at these pictures, and now we will remember what we saw. And extremism include many involvers. So, like, not all extremist persons are in the same level of extremism. They don't have the same level of responsibility. So, like, there is some active extremists, or just passive extremists, like a child or a woman, someone making her wear the hijab. Or it can be a career extremist, like shuyukh, like politicians. So there is another in psychology, they talk about victim-offender overlap. So, meaning that victims and offenders, they are same people. They are same people, or they share same characteristic. In other way, if you get a victim of extremism today, he will likely to be the extremist of tomorrow. So by saving the extremist victim today, we have one less extremist for tomorrow, active extremist. So extremism in dynamics, if we want to talk about extremism dynamics, there is the victim, the dependent, and the dominant, the extremist. So there is always someone dependent, someone dominant. And the dominant one, he wants to stay dominant, like men. Men want to be dominant in the relationship. So he used the Quran, he used whatever he wants, so to keep his dominance on his wife. Or the woman, she wants to be dominant on her children, so she will use the Quran. So that's how we see. We have the offender is the dominant, and we have the victim who is the dependent. And people use their power, they use the religion, they use whatever they want to keep those dependent, and they deceive them, they delude them. That's how you find sheikh, or you find someone using the Quran and deluding his followers, so to keep them dependent to him. And we can now, I call it the deceived, deluded, dependent disorder, because this disorder is due to a dysfunction in the thought process. And this dysfunction is psychological and not biological. And it can be treated and can be fixed. So the goal of the treatment is to treat that deception, to know the deluded person that someone deluded him and someone are using him. So in Islamic context, it's a mental manipulation aims to normalize victim with a wide variety of human rights abuse, including spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, child abuse, women abuse, financial abuse, sex abuse. So that's what extremism is about. It's about changing norms from the norms we know to other norms we don't know. It's normalizing you with these victims, and they make the victim look at these things as normal things. So, and that's why people became extremists. So the abuser in Islamic context, in Islamic extremism context, the abuser can be a religious leader, parent, guardian, spouse, employer, intimate partner, supervisor, service provider, politician, or can be, and as I said, the abuser deludes the victim by using the combination of his leverage, power, and his extreme religious point of view to maintain his dominance on the dependent. I tried to list some symptoms. It's a very long list, so I'm not going to go through the list, but if you love the main figure, like sheikh or politician more than you love yourself or your children, there is something going wrong with you. Or if you listen to some leader without questioning, there is something wrong. Or if you share the same clothes, or you share the same music, or you don't listen to the music at all, there is many symptoms that we can recognize that this person was being victimized by another person and was deluded by another person. It's a long list, so we are not going to go through it. That's it. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. So we just got the coffee and everything. So we're just setting up. Excuse us. It'll be another 2-3 minutes. But yeah, you're welcome to grab some coffee and finger sandwiches and cookies. And we're gonna have a break for about 20 minutes to half an hour. The bathrooms are all the way down the hall to the left. And yeah, so we can help yourselves. Social work. So that's interesting.
Well, I have a good example. So how do we fix it? Before we get to how to fix it, here's just the reality of it. And I don't see things changing. If it is going to change, it's going to come purely from a just pure supply and demand economic point of view, as opposed to something that's setting your values. So there's the outreach side, which I haven't done. Sorry. Outreach. And then there's actual fundraising, corporate development please come out and get some food if there are snacks and coffee outside, and we can bring it back.
Those relationships are going to change.
Yeah.
So it's kind of predominant Muslim societies. I mean, the oh, what's it? In the large, so I'm wondering how much the native cultures can accept that word Islam, because certainly there are versions of Christianity and how much you think comes from Islam itself. I know it's not exactly.
So there are.
But I mean, there are Christian students.
Right, but
who are very bad on it.
But yeah, but I guess it's not. So it's not a central law. Like your husband has to go to court. They will send you home.
There were also laws like that in the U.S. not too.
Right, that's true. That's very true. That's very true. That's very true. But I do think it's quite. I do think
I'm not Muslim, so I don't know.
but I haven't looked at so I'm only focused on that. But maybe I should do that. Maybe I should do that.
So then,
You don't need to go for this decaf.
there's one with an O on top.
Okay, there's one with an O on top.
Or a D. Hi.
I just want to introduce myself. I'm Aisha,
Hi, Aisha.
a reporter from RNS.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for inviting me. I do hope to get going.
Oh.
But is it just going to be like Q&A after this? Or?
Yeah, like a moderated panel discussion.
Yeah, but it will be live streamed.
It will be,
Yeah, okay. So that should be alright.
So far away.
Yeah, if I need any of the speakers' contact information, will I be able to contact you for that? If I want to do like a follow-up interview
Sure,
or
yeah.
something? Okay. Well, thank you so much.
No worries.
Take care.
Thanks for coming.
Which way it's going.
Yeah, thanks to you for the second. That's what I say almost.
Then I'm going to wake up and it's going to all be at night.
Every time I listen to the news, I'm like, oh my God, this is my life.
Oh, my name's Max. Nice to meet you. Did you happen to go to the last round speaker? Because there's still that speaker.
Oh, no.
So you're graduating? No. Okay. I could probably. I'm about to graduate from Brandeis.
That will help you lose weight. A little snack.
Yeah. I'll have some calories. Yeah.
Just waking up in the morning, got a place alarm. Every day of my life, I praise Allah. Living life as a Muslim in a foreign land. It's not easy, but I know that others got a plan. Turn on the tap and let the cold water flow. Wash my body from my head to my toe. Eat breakfast, cocoa pops and frosties. Turn on the kettle and make Arabic Aussie. My beard looks good and my hoodie is your feet. You gotta represent when you're preaching on the streets. Yeah, I meet up and say salam to the Ankies, or to the Pakistani, and you got one Iraqi. Go to the tomb, cause we go in marble arch. When I see a sister by herself, looking mashallah. She was wearing hijab and looked and needed. She had very good character and thinking.
Thank you for listening to Muslimish Freethinkers. Do let us know what you think of this episode at facebook.com/Muslimish. Don't forget to visit us at muslimish.org.